You are listening to Waffle, the bite-sized podcast with Paul Jenkins. First broadcast on Rossendale Radio on the 26th of April 2020. This week, Paul talks superheroes, punk and poetry with writer Neal Zetter.
104.7 Rossendale Radio.
Welcome back to 104.7 Rossendale Radio. It's Paul Jenkins here with the Weekend Wind Down, and I have on the phone Neal Zetter. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Paul. Hello, good morning. How are you?
I'm all good, thank you. Whereabouts are you joining us from today?
I'm from London. I live in Chingford in London E4, which is just on the Essex border, but just hanging in London in the borough of Waltham Forest.
Absolutely. Well, my family are from round that way, Woodford Green, Walthamstow, all that sort of area. So
Okay.
we've my great granddad used to go and visit there all the time. So I know the A13 corridor very well.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, good to be here anyway.
Now, Neal, you're a poet who's published countless pieces of work in some in anthologies, mostly in your own work, and you've been doing this for quite a while now. But I read through your biography, and before you came to poetry, or you came to poetry as a living, you had a proper job. You were working 25 years in senior management, weren't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I started when I left school working in local government for my own local authority, which is Waltham Forest. And I used to work in the HR department, or personnel as it was called then. But because I've always been a creative type, I used to start writing a lot of the recruitment adverts, which is quite creative. So copywriting, of course, as it's called. And then I moved over to the leisure department in about 1981, which was promoting all the council's sports facilities, leisure services, entertainments. So that was kind of being creative. I used to commission people to design brochures and leaflets for the council as well on those facilities. And then 1989, I moved over to Westminster Council in central London, and I did the same thing, but for the whole council. But because I was already writing, I've been writing poems since I was 6 years old. When I moved over to Westminster, I was right in the centre of Comedy Land, hundreds of comedy clubs up London. So in the evenings, after work, a bit like changing into Superman in a telephone box, I used to change to super poet, although not everybody thinks I'm super poet, so I'm just poet. But I used to change into a super poet and go out and perform in West End comedy clubs in the evening, and did that for many, many years.
And this is, I think, do you find this, that when, you possibly have this more over time, is that people sometimes look at people writing poetry as very much as a hobby, which is what it was for you probably at that time. But when was that moment where you thought, this is what I'm doing in the evenings? How do you kind of get that mental thing of, I'm going to switch this over, this is going to become my career?
Well, I started writing poems when I was 6 years old. I mean, I really did, and I've never ever stopped since then. Although a lot of the poems when I was in my teens come out as lyrics, as song lyrics, because I'm a big music fan, as we'll find out later. But when I got to about 18, 19, I thought I really want to try and do something with these poems. I really wanted to reach a wider audience. So I started to publish my own little books, which were sort of cheap affairs. One of my friends used to have this massive photocopier as he worked for a local printer, and he used to do them for me fairly cheap. And I used to just sell them to friends and family, mainly at gunpoint. To a few local shops as well. But again, I thought I want to do a little bit more than this, because I think most people that are poets, certainly if they wish to reach a wider audience like myself, it's frustrating just doing that. But I was never quite sure how I could reach a wider audience. And then I used to get Time Out magazine, the days when you had to pay for it. And they used to have a poetry section, and in that there was an advert for poets wanted to perform at a club called the Hard Edge Club. And that was in the middle of Soho, 1989, right by the Windmill Theatre, actually, right next to it. In 1989, and I contacted the guys that ran it through the advert, and they said, well, come along. And literally, as soon as I went along there and stood up and started to read my poems, I got the bug and thought, I've just got to do this. I want to do this. I want to reach more people. I feel I've got something to say. I feel I can say it in a way that interests other people, which I think is the key thing. It's not just having something to say, but to say it in a way that other people can relate to it and understand it. And it really went from there.
And because everyone can talk in front of other people in some way or another, but knowing that you have that buzz when you come off, that what you said people wanted to hear. And I should imagine in those sort of early times, it was maybe 5 or 10 minute slots you were doing, sharing
Absolutely.
maybe 1 or 2 poems. But now, of course, if you're running an event, people, want to hear, because you've got a bigger back catalogue of stuff. I mean, how many books have you published now?
Well, I've published 8 books, which are all children's books. I've written my next 4 books as well, coming out from 2 different publishers over the next 3 or 4 years, literally over 3 or 4 years, because I try and get a book out a year.
Yeah.
And of course, you have to get on a publisher's roster as well. They've got other books to be published, but I've got agreement to publish the next 4 books over the next 3 or 4 years. But I've written about 900 poems in my time, and I've written hundreds of adult poems too. It's just that adults generally don't buy poetry books, or if they do, they just sit on the coffee table and nobody really reads them. So it's really the children's market that is absolutely booming at the moment. There's some great children's poets around. Despite Kindle's, children's book sales are booming, and children's poetry books are booming, and it figures big on the curriculum. So the answer to that is hundreds and hundreds of poems, but the books, 8 published at the moment, and 4 more on the way, but all aimed at the children's market. Although I do find that lots of parents buy them and enjoy them as well, and I do try and make sure that there's plenty of my books for parents too, not just for children.
I find performing children's poetry to adults to be really rewarding, actually, because I think they get a break every, especially if you go to a poetry evening and you've got sometimes some really dark themes that are coming out, and then you stand up there and do a poem about badgers farting or something. It's actually quite nice for people.
Oh, absolutely, and I think we're obviously. Kids love listening to adult poems for all kinds of reasons. And I've got some poems that are a bit blue, but I mean, I wouldn't do them on air, and I wouldn't do them to the wrong audience. I mean, they're very much for comedy clubs. But I've just got lots of poems that are more for adults, because they're about adult topics. So I've got a poem about coffee. Most children don't drink coffee, not younger children, obviously. Teenagers do. But kids are always really interested when you say adult poem, because I think it's going to be rude, even if it isn't. And I think for adults listening to children's poems, I think we're all children at heart, aren't we? I mean, we all like, or lots of us like Star Wars or Doctor Who, or, lots of kids' programs, or Harry Potter, whatever it might be. And so long as we can open up the child in us, I think we can enjoy children's poems as well. So although I've actually labelled them, I think maybe it's good not to label poetry as adults or children's or teens. Just it is what it is, and hopefully we can like it and enjoy it.
Have you got something you might be able to share for us to start off, Neal?
Yeah, I've got a poem here which I'm going to read, which is from my Here Come the Superheroes book, Raps and Rhymes to Save the Galaxy is the subtitle. And it's a book full of poems all about superheroes and the superhero genre, which I've created out of my own head, the characters, that is. Obviously, I can't write about Marvel or DC characters because copyright. Now, the interesting thing with this particular poem, and the reason why I picked it, because it started off as an adult poem in about 1989, 1990, that I was reading in comedy clubs. Then when I started working in schools more regularly in the mid-90s, late 90s, early noughties, I started to read to teenagers, and they really enjoyed it. So then I thought I'd try it in primary schools, and in the early noughties and the mid-teens, I tried it in primary schools, and the younger kids liked it. So now it's in my children's book, and again, hopefully it's fairly universal in its appeal. This is about my new girlfriend. She's with me today, I always tell the children, and I'm a married man, so they look at me aghast in the class.
Oh, goodness.
They go, goodness, where is your girlfriend? And I say, she's over there. And they can't see her. And I say, well, that's because I'm going out with the invisible lady. I'm meeting her for a date. I'm going out with the invisible lady. She said she'd meet me at 8, but she's making me wait. She's 1 hour late, though I couldn't find her if I was standing behind her. I'm going out with the invisible lady, though what she looks like, I don't know. I'm going out with the invisible lady. I could so easily tread on her toe, or leave without her when we go to the cinema or to a show. It is quite apparent my girlfriend's transparent. I'm going out with the invisible lady. I walked right through her last night. I'm going out with the invisible lady. I can't see her, though it's broad daylight, like a polar bear on a background of white. She's out of my sight. The torture I've been through because my girlfriend's see-through. I'm going out with the invisible lady, though we've never met face to face. I'm going out with the invisible lady. She could be standing in this very place, though all you say is empty space. Don't say I'm a nutcase. My girlfriend's invisible, it's true. She just vanishes into the blue. I'm going out, the invisible lady. I'm still waiting here on my own. I'm going out, the invisible lady. It looks like one more evening alone. She's got no skin and bones, but she still could have phoned. I guess I'm not in her future plans. Perhaps she's run off with the invisible man. There you go.
Oh, that's a cracking end. There's some of those rhymes in there that you're thinking. I just love it. When a poet gets a rhyme, you think, where are they going with this? And it was the apparent with transparent. That really hooked on me, that one.
Yeah, I always get a bit nervous that people can see some of the rhymes coming, but obviously when you write lots of poems, there's always going to be some rhymes that are predictable. But the best ones, of course, are always the ones that are just inspirational. When you write, they just pop in your head, and they tend to be the ones that are a little bit smarter and people can't guess so quickly. And of course, that creates a lot more interest in the poem when that's the case. Well,
I tell you what, we'll come on to that if that's all right. We've very quickly. I really looked at the time and realised how long we've been talking in this first section, Neal. I could talk to you all day. What we're going to do is we're going to go to one of your music choices now, and then what we'll do is we'll probably have a chat about why you've chosen this particular song when we come back after it's finished. You've chosen London Calling by The Clash.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Weekend Wind Down. It's Paul Jenkins here, and we're talking to Neal Zetter. We just heard London Calling by The Clash, and this was one of your first choice, Neal. And you immediately went to The Clash first of all. What was it that drew you to them?
Oh, well, I love their music, and I kind of grew up. I'm 60 years old. I was 60 last October, and I grew up on the sort of Beatles and Stones, hearing them, but not really being into them because I was only a wee lad, 10, 11, when the Beatles split up. And then I really got into the whole glam rock scene about 1973. I think it was Elton John playing Crocodile Rock, which was the first bit of music that really kind of switched me into it. But I was a young man or teenager, and I couldn't really get into it like you want to get into it when you're 13 years old, like going to gigs, etc., and wearing all the gear. I was too young. So I thought I kind of missed the boat. And then punk rock came along, and I thought, wow, this is it. I was 17, 18, and I threw myself into it. I didn't actually wear all the gear, but I loved the music. I was the first person in my sixth form to buy any punk records. And I went to lots of punk gigs. And The Clash, I particularly picked this record because, one, I think The Clash were the best punk band and one of the best bands for me ever. Two, myself and my wife have been together 41 years now, and it was the first Christmas present that she bought me, Christmas 1970.
She bought you London Calling?
She did. She bought the album. That was our first Christmas together, and she bought me that. I've still got it. Obviously digitalised now.
You chose well.
Okay, good man. Also, I live in London. 99% of my work is in London. I do work outside of London, of course, but most of my work is in London. I love London. I've got poems about London. And I think the other thing is, I love Joe Strummer. Of course, he's no longer with us. I saw one of his last gigs in London. And I think the punk ethic, the punk ethos is still very, very much what I do in my poetry.
Well, I was going to ask you about that actually, because that kind of performance and writing process, and I find there's a massive crossover between songwriting and lyricism and poetry and fiction writing. And what's your approach if somebody comes to you and says, right, we'd like you to write you, for example, your next 4 books. What's the plan? How do you sort of go about organising your brain and your ideas together?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I've always got a list of all the poems that possibly I could write. Obviously, we're only doing audio here, but I could show you the list that's on my iPad. When I think of an idea, I just jot it down, and literally it might be, banana, telephone box, I don't know, lockdown, and I just write one word on my iPad, and I just keep this long list, and it's a very, very long list. And if you scroll down it takes about a minute, because I show it to kids in class. So there were the ideas. But of course, every now and then, yes, you need to write a book. So what I try and do is pull them together and theme them, because I think there's a lot of poetry books out there that are just mixed anthologies, and I've got 1 or 2 of those as well, and they've sold a lot of copies, and I'm very pleased with them. But I think if you can often group your poems, your poetry book then stands out a little bit more. So, for example, I've got my superheroes book, I've got my supervillains book, I've got one which I've done with Josh Siegel, who I know was on your programme a few weeks ago, which is Yuck and Yum, which is all funny food poetry. I've got one that's on animals, Gorilla Ballerina. So I do try and group them, because I think then your own book stands out a little bit more in the bookshop, maybe, if people are looking at it on the shelf. And also, I think it's a bit more of a challenge to write lots of poems all on a similar topic. So they're kind of my main they're kind of my main aims. And in terms of how I get the ideas are just based on experience, things that I see, places I go to. Often things kids say to me when I'm in schools, things I hear on the tube, things I hear parents say outside of the school gates or teachers in the staff room. Things I see on telly. I've written a few lockdown poems at the moment because it's an experience that I'm going through. So, and I guess lots of writers write like that.
It's having the eyes and ears, I think, to be able to pick those things out. And occasionally people will say things to you and you think, you know what, I really wish I had a pen right now because I need to get out of the situation I'm in, because you want to run off and write the poem about it, don't you?
You do, but I think the key thing is once you've got the idea is to be able to express it in a way that people can understand your point and can relate to it. I think it's a bit like jokes and comedy. I would say that the funniest comics are the ones. It's not necessarily the way they tell the joke, although that's a big part of it, or what the joke's about, but it's that ability for people to listen to it and think, I know exactly what they mean.
Yeah, to be able to bring a room together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we've had too much of a break away from your poems. Actually, let's have you got something for us we talk about that sort of universal kind of speaking to everybody. What have you got in the bag for us?
Yeah, I mean, I've got this one here, which is called Claude Le Croissant. This is from
Yuck and Yum, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote this one because I'm not particularly good at French, but I quite like playing with words, and I know a few French words, so I've chucked some French words into this, and lots of kids love croissants, adults as well, obviously, so hopefully this has got quite a wide appeal, and this is called Je m'appelle Claude Le Croissant, and Je m'appelle, for those that don't know, just means I am, or my name is in French, so it goes like this. Je m'appelle Claude Le Croissant, the alternative to bread. Why bore yourself with sandwiches? Just purchase meat instead. Je m'appelle Claude Le Croissant. For your breakfast, lunch or tea, my body shapes a crescent moon, or like the letter C. You can stuff me with a salad. You can eat me with cheese spread. You can sprinkle me with almonds, then shake sugar on my head. I travelled here by Eurostar from somewhere in the Med. Je m'appelle Claude Le Croissant. I am neither bun nor cake, soft and flaky. I'm the pastry that's the tastiest of bakes. Je m'appelle Claude Le Croissant. I'm the favoured food of France. Other doughs try to outdo me, but they never stand a chance. You can cover me with butter. You can smother me with jam. You can serve me with salami. You can fill me up with ham. Your companion from the continent. Remember who I am. Je m'appelle Claude Le Croissant. Start of your patisserie. If you bite me and you like me, shout out, oui, oui, oui. There you go.
Je m'appelle
with a wee at the end.
Which everybody's probably laughing at wee as you finish.
Which of course means yes in French.
It does indeed, yes.
Knows that's listening.
Yeah, that doesn't stop it being funny for English people. Speaking Fronglish is one of my favourite pastimes.
Ah, fantastic.
I started A-level French until my French teacher took me to one side and said, if it was about speaking French, I think you'd probably get away with it. But occasionally we have to write it down too, and I just couldn't. I couldn't nail French grammar at all. So he diverted me back to theatre studies, which I did a lot better at.
Brilliant.
We're going to take another music break now. We've got Marina and the Diamonds, which is someone we've not played on Rossendale Radio before. So do you want to introduce Mowgli's Road for us?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I picked this, I mentioned punk being a fantastic craze. I mean, I've lived through a few crazes after punk. I was into Britpop, and difficult not to choose an Oasis or a Blur song, I must admit, for this, but I only had 3 songs to pick. And another massive craze that I got into was the big indie revival in the early noughties going into the early teens. And there was fantastic songwriters around at that time that sprung up, who are still around, people like Florence and the Machine. I was very much into Kate Nash, fantastic words, Emmy the Great, who I'm a big fan of, and bands like the Arctic Monkeys, Franz Ferdinand, White Stripes. And I think Marina and the Diamonds is the finest songwriter out of all of them. I mean, she's had 3 #1 albums, fantastic songs. And I particularly picked this track, 1, because I love it, 2, because it's actually about, if you listen to the words, which are very clever, of course, paralleling it to the Jungle Book and Mowgli facing the fork in the road. It's very much about her own musical career and a decision to, well, do I do this or don't I do this? I want to get into music. I want to get into show business. As I say, she parallels that against Mowgli's dilemma with the roads that he faced in the Jungle Book. And, you know, being a poet, being a writer, we've already discussed some of this. I had decisions like that in my career as well. So that's the reason why I picked it.
Okay, this is Marina and the Diamonds. Welcome back to the Weekend Wind Down. It's Paul Jenkins and the final part of my interview this afternoon with poet Neal Zetter. Now, Neal, we were talking a little bit earlier on and you mentioned about your superheroes and supervillains work that you've done. And I think you're running a competition at the moment with the Reading Realm app. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. The Reading Realm is an app for children and for schools and teachers, which really encourages children to read, to enjoy literacy and to develop their reading and writing styles. It is an app. If you look at their Facebook site, it's Reading Realm on Facebook, and you can go to the likes page and you'll see that Ian Eagleton, who is the guy behind it all, who's a teacher and an educationalist, education consultant, he actually hosts a live show through the Facebook likes site on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And yes, we're currently running a competition for children to write their own superhero poem based on, or a supervillain based on a superhero or a supervillain that they can create out of their own head. So not one that we know from the movies or from comics or graphic novels, but a brand new one. And that's all explained really if you go to the Facebook page.
And I think they can win copies of your books. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. The winner will win either, and they can choose a signed and dedicated copy of supervillains or of superheroes. They can pick whichever they want.
Which is brilliant. I've had a very quick browse through some of the ones that you've been sharing online at the moment, and there's some fascinating powers that I think you've managed to get. I think that's the trick with a superhero or villain, is that they're actually working out what their power's going to be, because they've all got something attached to them, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. And kids often say to me, if I'm running a similar session in a school, they might say to me, well, how do I think of a superhero or a supervillain? I say, well, think of their power, because so many superheroes or supervillains have got their powers, their name built around their powers. You know, the Flash is the Flash because he's fast. Spider-Man is Spider-Man because he's spidery.
And Squirrel Girl is the one that I always come back to. Is that if you, I mean, there's, and this is a genuine, you'll know this. You're a Marvel aficionado. I don't know, Neal, but Squirrel Girl has the power to talk to and control squirrels. I mean, that's a useful thing, I think.
That is a power I would love. We get lots in our gardens, so I would love to be able to do that.
Now this is your latest book, is Gorilla Ballerina, and that's we're into animal territory, aren't we? There,
we are indeed. Yeah, Gorilla Ballerina came out last September. I mean, I try and get a book out a year at the start of school term, and it's subtitled "A Bonkers Book of Animal Poems," and there's about 50 poems in it, all about animals, all a bit wacky, a bit crazy. And again, I've tried to pick some more unusual animals, or if they're common animals, to give them a slightly more unusual predicament. So would you like me to do this one now?
I was going to say, which one are we hearing?
Well, this one is an animal that I guess is fairly rare, but we all know of it. But it's got an unusual predicament. As human beings, we're quite fortunate because if we don't like one food, we can pick another food. There are loads of foods out there for us. But the poor anteater that doesn't like ants is really, really in a bit of a predicament. So this is called My Anteater. My anteater's growing thinner, doesn't like ants for her dinner. Won't eat ants if boiled or roasted, won't eat ants if baked or toasted, won't eat ants if briskly fried up, won't eat ants if slowly dried up. Ants burgers won't get a look in, nor will ant-filled treacle pudding. Won't eat ants if mashed and mangled, won't eat ants if lightly scrambled. Curried ants are far too spicy, ant risotto's far too ricey. Won't eat ants with margarine on, won't eat ants with double cream on. Won't eat ants with jam inside them, turns her nose up, just won't try them. Won't eat ants in Dijon mustard, dipped in cold vanilla custard. Won't eat ants in crispy batter, ketchup won't improve the matter. Won't eat ants with salt and pepper, cream cheese, Stilton, brie or feta. Won't eat ants in hot fajitas, she's an anti-ant eater.
She's an anti-ant eater.
Bit of a mouthful, that one.
That's it. I was going to say, you took your time on that last line. You can.
I did. I always slow down when I get to that last line. That's actually on my YouTube channel as well, along with some other poems if people want to check my stuff out.
Oh, fantastic. Where do we head there?
It's well, if you just search for Neal Zetter on YouTube, then you'll find 4 or 5 of my poems, and go to my channel. You'll find it all there.
I suppose there's not a lot of Zetters online, is it? You're the only Zetter I've met.
The only thing is I'm Neal, Neal. Neal. So I think if you just Google me, you'd probably get it self-corrected. But I'm Neal with an A, Neal. And my workshop site has got hundreds of free poems on, which I'm really trying to push at the moment, because obviously with schools in semi-lockdown and the nation in lockdown, people, teachers, children can access my poetry, whether it's in class or at home, and hopefully enjoy it for free. There's literally hundreds of poems on my CCCP workshops. .co.uk website, cccpworkshops.co.uk, and of course people can follow me on Twitter, which is at Neal Zetter Poet,
I'm almost certain that the people of Rossendale and beyond, because we have the good thing about radio now is that it's broadcast through the internet, and we found we've got listeners all over the country rather than just in the valley, which is wonderful. So we will certainly be directing people in your direction. That's and I'll put the links up on the Facebook page for your site, so that people can get in contact with you through Rossendale Radio as well, Neal.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you this afternoon. We've got time for one more music choice before we disappear, and you've taken the kind of the tempo down a little bit for this last one with She Drew the Gun.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the reason why I picked this is, it's a Liverpool band, which I guess a lot of people aren't too familiar with. She Drew the Gun. They write great songs. They're a mixed boy-girl band, and they come from Liverpool. My daughter's in Liverpool and her fella at the moment, and we go up to Liverpool a lot, and I absolutely love the city. And I picked this as well because I do spend a lot of time, and always have done, as a poet, and certainly when I was running my club as well, my Poetry and Spoken Word Club, trying to develop young poets and their talents. And I also used to have musicians coming along and try to help develop them too. So they are an up-and-coming band. I thought I would give them a good plug, and hopefully people can discover them. She Drew the Gun, and this particular song of theirs is called Since You Were Not Mine.
Thank you very much, Neal. We'll speak to you very soon.
Okay, thank you.
104.7 Rossendale Radio.
And so we come to the end of another Waffle, the Bite-Sized podcast. My thanks go to Neal Zetter for coming on the show, chatting poetry and his love of music with us. And it was fantastic to hear him talking about his books, particularly about his superhero poems and that brilliant poem about an anteater and all the other animal poems. I strongly suggest going to check out CCCP workshops online, and Neal will be happy to help you, I'm sure, find out more. Tune in next week for another great guest. Actually, we've got a selection of guests coming next week on the podcast, and my thanks as ever go to Melanie Kemp, to Lee Ball, and to our colleagues at Rossendale Radio for all their help and work on production of Waffle, the Bite-Sized podcast. We will see you next week.